Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode, the final of the week, day 5, and today we're going to be tackling a notoriously difficult title, Battletoads, but to change things up, we are going to be playing on the much less discussed port on the Sega Genesis. While Battletoads on the NES is considered to have some cool features and ideas, the general consensus is that its difficulty spikes are far too severe, along with limited continues, to make it an overall good game. It would seem that a 16-bit port would be a great opportunity for Sega to improve the game while proving their slogan was true, that Genesis does what Nintendo don't. If they could brighten up the graphics, keep the controls tight, take advantage of the grungy sound, and maybe make some of the really challenging parts a bit more accessible, or at least have difficulty settings, this could be the definitive port, and since I actually do like playing through Battletoads and NES, this could have been one of my favorite games of all time. I'm feeling up to the challenge. Let's plow all 12 levels here and take a look at what Battletoads on Genesis is all about. It starts out decent looking enough, it's definitely more colorful, fighting seems okay, but sometimes it's kind of easy to detect right from the start that it feels a bit more finicky and clunky, believe it or not. Not in a broken way, but just that it wasn't totally refined and certainly didn't improve at all. The improved visuals are still really interesting, and it's fun to see a game like this in 16-bit, and same strategies of using your dash attack along with walking out of trouble or awkward situations is important as well to get through this. The boss fight moves a little slower, but overall, very similar first level makes you interested to see what's next. Second level is when you're dropping down a line, and it is much more vibrant than you're used to. Still with the same enemies such as crows that you might dismiss after one hit, but remember, these guys are actually your best chance at beating this game. What I mean by that is you absolutely want to juggle them for points and a 1-up on the final hit. Plus you do get a life after 100,000 points too, so it cannot be overstated that you absolutely want to juggle these guys as much as you can to get lives for the rest of the game. Using your wrecking ball basically feels the same as it's just as effective, along with sticking toward the bottom of the screen to get past the expending electric gates. The third level, Turbo Tunnel, is wildly notorious in the gaming community for its incredibly sharp peak of difficulty so early in the game. While prettier to look at, it still packs a bit of a challenge, but they did take the opportunity to make your vehicle larger on the roadway, and they also slowed things down just enough to make it feel intense, but without making you wonder if your game is broken like the NES one did. Going between the walls and moving toward your jumps feels pretty good for the most part. One difference is that they don't even give you a warning when it's time to start jumping between spots without ramps, so that's a little weird, but since it's slower and if you've played the other one before, it's not that bad to react in time. The vibrant colors definitely make it feel like you're racing through a big brain full of Chuck E. Cheese pit balls, and interesting as always to hear the Genesis effect on the soundtrack. Fourth level is the Ice Cave, and here's when I start to struggle just a little bit to adjust with the ever so slightly different feeling controls. Clunky, stiff, whatever you want to call it, didn't make an already challenging level any easier, plus the hit detection to turn you into a pancake has grown, which seems like a minor detail, but let me warn you, this is a major foreshadowing of how brokenly difficult some parts of the game are later in this video. The platforms are smaller and fall even faster than before, along with the same spikes you're used to that kill you, of course, in one hit, which means you need to be super careful, even while killing enemies that would normally stop your momentum in the NES port. The concepts are the same, like throwing the ice cube to break the walls, and it really tests your control on the slippery surfaces to avoid the pits and danger. Fifth level, Surf City. This one was definitely frustrating me at first because it doesn't handle quite the same as the NES one. Normally, you can sometimes push forward and skip over logs, but no such thing was working for me here, and I started to lose some lives this way. You also can't really control your momentum very well in this port. If you press forward even once, then it feels like you're going to constantly fight the D-pad while rocking back and forth, so I just tried to stick to the back of the screen, only pressing up or down, never forward. So yes, the control is noticeably worse in this section. The mid-level boss though is considerably easier, since he's slower and if you use the stick, it's not that hard to corner him and give him the business. The level ends with the same mine sections, but are a bit slower, so this is actually quite a bit easier than before, especially if you don't try pressing forward at all on the D-pad. Sixth level, Snake Pit, and oh my god did I struggle here with the Genesis, and it's for stupid reasons. For the most part, it felt pretty similar, but the first thing you'll notice is how broken they look when they turn coming and going. The tail shrinks a bunch in a single frame of animation, without warning, so you always have to keep that in mind and never hang toward the back when there's a turn. I actually died quite a bit here on the last section. It seemed like they definitely made this jump way harder to pull off, so much so that I actually didn't want to try the shortcut again, and decided to finish it the true way. And good lord, I absolutely went through some bullshit here. Another weird quirk, which seems like an oversight, while holding onto the snake, it actually moves slightly faster than you. How does that work exactly when you're holding onto it? Are you sliding down? I just don't understand. With the sliding, along with the snake tail being fucking nuts around turns, this section right here gave me some serious hell. I had to get as much of a jump start as I could on this section to avoid running out of room, which happened to be a lot, and I started to get nervous for my limited continues even though I did pile up lives in level 2. Only halfway through the game, gotta dial in to finish this strong. 7th level, Volkmeyer's Inferno. So the challenge in this part, it's definitely differently weighted. Normally, beating up your token rat enemies isn't that big of a deal, but with the weird hit detection and the way they could hit you 2 or 3 times in a row while you're helpless was horrendous. The logs also move much faster, making these little jumps even more nerve-wracking. When I got to the plane section, I was definitely nervous to close this thing out. The fireball section is as hard as it ever was, and I'd say the vibrant contrast in colors actually made it harder to focus. It's like I had to zoom my eyes out mentally, so everything was a blur aside from the space right in front of the plane to get past this, and thank goodness for the one up here to help me from dropping too far behind, as I had a big stalemate for a few tries. The missiles are a little slower and easier to avoid than the NES, but there is no trick to hang out at the bottom of the screen, so with that in mind, it actually makes the section more difficult. The final race through electric gates is still pretty intense and requires your attention and precision, but it's not quite as unforgiving as the NES, which I appreciated because I had to get the hell out of this level. 8th level, Intruder Excluder. I absolutely hate some levels with bottom screen cutoff, and this is one of them. I actually had a harder time, despite some enemies and things moving a little slower. This is where control started to really make things difficult in my opinion. It's hard to get your big ass head around the edges of platforms, and double tapping left or right to try to get yourself in the perfect spot can result into you accidentally sprinting off the ledge to your death. They still have the same hazards of enemies that take half your health, gas and fans that kill you instantly, and it has one of the most broken and stupid freaking bosses that I've ever played. This guy is already hard on the NES, but here, he is a fucking broken nightmare. Here's the thing, they made him slower as if they were trying to help, but since he's so floaty and he has the most overpowered, bullshit, magical pancake boots you've ever seen, it can be really difficult to know when to get in there to cause any damage. If you're anywhere near his feet, that's your life, plain and simple. There's another life, or another one. Oh great, he can squish me in midair, awesome, that makes sense. Wow, this is some fun, but seriously, what the hell were they doing when they tested this level? Yeah, it's fine, and that's fine, yeah, let's go ahead and release this. Simply put, fuck this guy. I was lucky to get out of here when I did. Alright, Terratubes, now we're on the home stretch and things are getting serious. So it's still a long level as before with a bunch of spikes and gears that you better be ready to race away from to avoid certain death. The enemies in general are actually just a little easier to deal with since they move a bit slower and seem to attack less quickly. Aside from these broken sharks, they just charge in with a wide open mouth and you're fucked if they catch you once because you're stunned in between hits and then it's all over from there. Thank goodness for the 1-up to keep this a stalemate until you can make it through. The little orange fish are still little cheap bastards that like to push you into one-hit kill spikes if they have a chance, so you need to bait them out the best you can, and then hope you can make it past the damn sharks, dude. The propeller sections are way slower for some reason, but to an annoying degree. This was never the hardest part of the level. Why even bother with this? It's senseless. How about tweak the controls to be tight and fix your stupid ass enemies that are even more broken than before? 10th level, oh man, so now we're on to Rat Race. And fortunately, they did make this a bit slower, and it helps, but the rats are still pretty tough to beat. It doesn't change the fact that you can't really make any mistakes in order to get down here in time. Even though the rats are slower, it definitely looks like you are too, so it doesn't really help that much, I guess. Same bullshit going on here, like gas waiting to end your life right around the corner, and you've definitely got to be very slick while slipping and sliding to the bottom of this. At the bottom, you've got a boss fight that is normally not too bad on the NES if you know how it's done. But once again, they made something slower without really examining still how broken it is. This guy is almost as hard as the other dude, but he is just as broken because the game does not hesitate to juggle you until your death, over and over and over. So once again, I'm here yelling at the TV as I just want to fucking move on, but can't because this guy's horns keep catching me and his damn pancake feet keep draining all my lives. And once again, I was super fortunate to get out of here when I did. Again, plain and simple, fuck this guy. Second to the last level, here we are at Klingerwinger, and my god, just like the NES version, you better make sure you have a perfectly pristine controller because I was getting my asshole brutally fisted here, no joke, until I finally changed controllers and the Switch made a world of difference. This level is definitely easier than the NES one though, if the controls are working properly, since you actually move faster than the ball chasing you in this version, as opposed to relying on the turns like in the other game. The boss is actually not the cheapest piece of shit ever conceived for a change, so in general this wasn't so bad and I felt a boost of hope and destiny as I was able to ram this guy aside and move on to the final level. Alright, so after a handful of cusses and a bag full of bullshit later, here we are at the final level. As I mentioned earlier, I really hate some levels that have lower level cutoff, and this is another one of them. Talk about anxiety provoking, being on tiny platforms knowing your death is literally always one little mistake away. This was really tense, as I was on my last continue and I knew this had to be the run. Getting sent back to the start screen at this point could have fucked me over completely, and I was considering just changing the review to Contra if that happened and coming back to this one later. The enemies, the graphics, the hit detection, the control, it just feels like seriously everything is against you at this point. It's just so hard dealing with the clunky shit at such a high degree. Like, you do not want to waste a single second to keep yourself safe, such as having to grab these poles immediately to not get blown off the ledge, and if you don't, obviously you get sent way back to the last checkpoint. This is honestly really tough, and I haven't found myself saying please to a game in a while, but I found myself doing it out of sheer desperation to finish. But revisiting this game brought that out of me, as I was begging for my character to be sure-footed, for enemies not to do some weird buggy crap as I pressed onward through heart-stopping drops and leaps in order to finally reach this final skank. Once I got here, I knew I could breathe a sigh of relief, because in classic broken game design, the whole game is hard as hell, while the last boss might just be the easiest thing ever. Heck, even easier than the first level. Honestly, I stand by that. This thing is that easy. What the heck were they thinking, dude? And after all of that heartache and anguish just for this, a few second ending, severely cut from the NES final screen, and then bam, you're at the start again, as if your achievement didn't mean shit and it didn't exist to begin with. Yep, so that's Battletoads on the Genesis. It's definitely cool to see the Battletoads world and the levels in 16-bit, more vibrant and colorful. Also interesting to hear the Genesis soundtrack within this game. And I had some fun with it. It's definitely hard and frustrating. I had a more frustrating time actually with this one than the NES one, probably just because I'm used to the NES one at this point. This one is slower, but it just felt a bit more like sketch and less within my control, if that makes sense sometimes. But definitely appreciate you guys tuning in for day 5. I will see you guys again next week. Remember to please comment, like, and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content and want to see more games getting destroyed in one sitting. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thank you so much.